So let's delve straight into the topic. This is a really good one, and it's based on an article that you wrote last year. It is called What to Do When You Are Stuck with the People You Have on the Bus.
Yeah,
What was
yeah.
happening with your clients back in 2015 that prompted you to write this article?
Well, I hear all the time, I hear from clients, I hear from colleagues, I hear from organizations big and large. We just can't hire the right people. We can't get the right people. Our people aren't doing what we need them to do. They aren't focused where we need them to focus. They aren't um, productive. They aren't engaged. And I always have to wonder if it's really about the people
Mm,
or if it's about the leadership and the direction that they're getting from their supervisors, from their bosses, from their managers. So is it really about not having the right people, or is it more about once you have hired somebody, the best person you can, making them, taking and developing them and fully unlocking their potential?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it was sort of a frustration of hearing over and over again that I just can't get the right people. I can't get the
Okay.
right people on the bus.
Okay. Okay. And, when you are working with your clients, isn't it important to spend time and effort in hiring the right people? Do you find that they rush in their hiring, or are they only hiring out of necessity, which creates poor decision making?
So absolutely, it's important to hire the right people. And I think one of the biggest, and I think the concept of the right people on the bus, by the way, is a great concept. It's a concept that was popularized by Jim Collins in his book From Good to Great. And the problem is it gets turned into from being the right person to being the perfect person.
Okay.
And the reality is the perfect person doesn't exist for the job. So it's really important to pay attention to the hiring process. And I think where I see employees most often maybe missing the boat a little bit on that is they're pretty good at interviewing and hiring for technical skills,
Okay.
for the technical aspects of the job. Where they're not, don't pay as much attention or don't have as good a process in place is actually hiring for fit, for cultural fit, and for values.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that has to be done, it takes some time and it takes some effort to actually figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
First, you have to know what your values are.
Mm-hmm.
Second, you have to know what behaviors actually um, are actually the behaviors that represent those values. So, because that's the only way you can hire for values, or the only way you can even see if values are a part, how to put those into the culture, is if you first identify what those values, what those behaviors are.
Okay.
So
Can
I tell, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you give me an example of a client that you've worked with where they said, Julie, we're really struggling with this. We don't know how to do this, but it's so important for the life of our company.
So yeah, so let's say that, for example, that a company says one of our values, now everybody says one of our values is integrity and honesty. And I agree with Patrick Lencioni when he says those are permission to play values. So you've got to figure out, okay, that's nice, but what are the values that really set you apart? And let's say it's flexibility, that you want people who are flexible, that can adapt, that can go with the flow. So then a question I would ask a client is, so if I was a fly on the wall, if I was on the ceiling watching, how would I know if somebody was demonstrating flexibility?
Mm,
So that's, you have to go to that standpoint of, okay, the value's flexibility, then how would I know if I was watching, how would I know they were demonstrating that? And they might say something like, well, if in a meeting we had to make a quick change in direction and they were able to go with that, they didn't get all upset and bent out of shape with that. if a customer called and wanted to make a change in the project and they were able to adapt without getting upset or irritated or
Mm-hmm.
frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
that would be indicators of that value of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take it one step further and you say, okay, what questions can I ask somebody to see if they have that characteristic or not?
Okay. Okay.
So you might go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, and you as the consultant bring that really important objective third party where you
Yeah,
can see things that somebody that is quote unquote in the trenches cannot always see at that time.
absolutely. And that's one of the benefits, of somebody from the outside is you can see that big picture from a little bit different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to see from different perspectives is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
So, so critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So an interesting talking point that you had sent me was, are you advocating, keeping underperforming staff around?
And absolutely not. If somebody is underperforming chronically over a long period of time, if they're toxic to the
Oh.
team, then absolutely don't keep them around. And I do see business owners, especially smaller business owners, keeping people around too long. And one of the things that just, and they say, well, I don't want to fire him because I might have to pay unemployment.
Mm.
Pay the unemployment. It's
Mm.
way cheaper than what a toxic, underperforming employee is costing you.
Mm-hmm.
However, how do you know if somebody's willing to change? How do you know what they can do? How do you know what their full potential is if you haven't clearly set expectations, if you haven't given them direction, coaching, and development, and then given them an opportunity to perform?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a tendency, it's sort of a paradigm, or it's ironic. There's a tendency to keep people around too long, yet during that time that you're keeping them around, not giving them any coaching or development or opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So you lose out on both sides. You keep somebody around, they're not performing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you fire them,
Mm-hmm.
but you've never really seen could they perform.
True. And something that you've always reminded me of, and the last time we spoke, it was leveraging people's strengths.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Really taking the time. So while hiring's important, I think most companies put some level of planning, some level of structure into their hiring process. Where I see it fall down then is in that coaching and development process.
Okay.
And I believe every company should have a structured
Mm-hmm.
coaching and development process for every single employee.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you got to hire an executive coach
Right.
for every single employee. But that means put a system and a process and expectation of your managers in place
Mm-hmm.
that you've got that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that in that coaching and development process that I advocate is to use some sort of an assessment, whether that's something like Strengths Finders or it's something like DISC, a behavioral or personality style assessment, or there's something called Profiles International, Profiles XT. There's a lot of different assessments out there. Some of them that cost a lot of money. There's even some free ones out there. And to do something, some sort of an assessment that shows strengths so that you and the employee know both. Because while you want to focus on your strengths, and I absolutely believe in focusing primarily on strengths, you have to at least neutralize those weaknesses or challenges.
Okay.
So start with some sort of an assessment that tells you where the person's strong
Okay.
and where some opportunities for growth may be.
Okay. Okay. And what has to be in place before you can decide the people on the bus are not the right people, or are they the right people?
I think first of all, you have to have a vision. You have to have a purpose or a goal or an outcome because people have to know what they're working towards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have something for people to work towards, how can you even judge?
Mm-hmm.
They might be working really hard, but it's not the direction that the company needs them to go.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have that. You have to have really clearly defined expectations. You have to let people know what you expect of them, and then you have to monitor and give feedback, not just negative feedback or critical feedback, but also positive feedback. What are they doing well? What may they need to change, or what behaviors do they need to adjust? So that's a piece of it. You have to let people have a voice. Until you've asked people what are their concerns,
Mm-hmm.
what's working for them, what's not working for them,
Mm-hmm.
what are their goals, what issues do they have. If you haven't let them express those things, then you're never going to get them to work at their full potential.
That would be very, very true. So, can you give some examples of leaders who have achieved great things with the people that they do have on the bus?
So, sure, I'll give you three examples that are public examples. I
Okay.
could give you some from my own experience, but they aren't going to be as knowledgeable, or people aren't going to know about as public. So one of my favorites, and this has always been one of my favorites, is high school football coaches.
Okay.
Because high school football coaches don't have the opportunity to recruit, right? They pretty much take who's in their district. And when you start moving into rural areas, it gets to be even more, you're quote unquote stuck with the people you've got on the bus,
Okay.
right? So there was this team in this small town in rural Kansas, and I think they won something like 79 games in a row. And it was a team that I was aware of even before the book was written about them, because I have family in that area. And they beat schools much bigger than them. 79 games in a row. If you look at that, that's like, that's probably 6, 7, 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have, you never, those teams that started winning those games, none of those players are still in place at the teams that, won the last part of those games.
Right.
And I always wondered, what is it? Because he's not he's not recruiting people from across the state or across the country. He's working with who's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wondered, what is it that allowed a coach like that, to be so successful over such a long period of time? And there's actually a book that now that's was written by somebody from, I think, the New York Times wrote it, and it's called Our Boys, A Perfect Season on the Plains,
Hmm.
with the Smith Center Redmond. And the guy that wrote the book is Joe Drape, Drape. So just an awesome example of how somebody took the talent, or lack thereof, that he had, the talent actually, whatever level that talent was at, and took them to superstar heights. The other people who are stuck with who they've got on the bus are military leaders. They get who they get. And there's a couple of books out that are great, also great books about a couple of Navy captains, one a submarine captain, the other, I think, a destroyer captain. And they took their crews from the worst in the fleet, from worst to first, or from worst to best. And their stories of how they did that, and the focus that they put on their staff, is really amazing. And one of those books is called It's Our Ship, and the other is called Turn the Ship Around.
Okay.
And I would really encourage people who are interested in how can they empower their staff more,
Mm-hmm.
to read all three of those books, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For one thing, I love taking and looking at information from areas that aren't directly related to business, but what lessons can you learn?
Right.
So what lessons can we learn from our military leaders? What lessons can we learn from our sports leaders, especially at the high school level?
Absolutely. Now, what can a leader do to achieve great results with the people they have been dealt with? What are some of the strategies?
So one of the things is, we've talked about already, that common purpose. What can you do? What is a common purpose that you can get people behind? And typically, while it may involve money or it may involve profits, it's got to be bigger.
Okay.
than profits. So one of the visions that is an example of that, Southwest Airlines is of course big in Dallas, and their vision is to be the world's most flown, most loved, most profitable airline. So while profit is a piece of it, I think they're a great example because while profit's a piece of it, and being the biggest or the most flown is a piece of it,
Mm-hmm.
the piece that people can really get behind, that employees can really get behind, is that most loved part.
Okay.
And so that vision is really critical. Identifying and building on the strengths of each person, which we've talked about already. This is taking on ever increasing responsibility. So give people an opportunity to take on additional responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to stretch beyond what even they may believe that they
Right.
can do.
Right.
And that's really scary for leaders, really scary. And it requires that the leaders do some things.
Mm-hmm.
It requires that they be really clear on expectations, that they communicate those expectations, that they make sure that the staff person has the training and the resources that they need to do the job. And then it's requiring accountability and following up. And it's not about dumping.
Right.
All too often, managers tend to either, when they delegate, they either micromanage or they dump.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one of those works.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
requires managers getting out
Mm-hmm.
of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
They're really focused on making every single person more competent.
Okay.
And that's what that coaching is about, and that ongoing coaching and development. How do you make every single person more competent?
Okay.
Cross training,
Right.
cross training is a critical piece to really working with who you've got
Mm-hmm.
and developing that bench strength. That's how you develop bench strength, is to cross train within the organization. And then, to really focus on what you can do every single day to help that person perform more effectively.
Right.
And as leaders, way too often we don't do this. As leaders, we really have to look when somebody fails, before we can say it's their failure. I believe we have to look at ourselves
Okay.
and say, was I clear with what I wanted? Did I give them the tools, the resources, and the training that they needed? And then did I hold them accountable on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't say yes to those three things, then the employee may have failed, and you also failed as a leader or a manager.
Right. Very, very true. Because it goes back to that saying of, if you're pointing the finger at somebody, there are already always three pointing back at yourself at the exact same time.
Right, right.
I love the article that you wrote last year because it talked about the gentleman who was on the submarine and how
Yes.
he inherited, what was it, 900 staff on that submarine?
The
Something like that?
submarine was, I think the submarine was closer to about 200.
Oh, well, that's good. That's even better.
Yeah, he had about 200 strapped. The cruiser had more like four or five, or the destroyer 400 or 500 um, employees. But yeah, you inherit them as a captain of one of those boats. Sure, there's been some sort of screening and recruiting before they ever get into the Navy, right? But as one of the captains on the boat, you get who you get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the beauties of looking at something like the military as an example and learning from it. One of the beauties is you've got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 other boats
Mm-hmm.
just like yours,
Mm-hmm.
with the same kinds of people you've got, with the same staff that came from the same recruiting, right? Everything's the same, except for the leadership.
Ah.
And so the differences in how those boats perform, I believe, can almost solely go to the leadership.
Okay.
because otherwise everything, they can't pay them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any ability to give somebody a raise or to
Mm-hmm.
use money as incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Just not there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is one of your favorite client stories where you have helped an organization really turn around either the leadership or their thought processes or, even their staff so they're increasing their productivity?
So one of the stories that I like is a client that was actually in Canada, and she came to me. It was small business. She came to me with a plan. She said, "I need my staff to do this differently. I've got this new." It was a communication plan, and she wanted to change the way they were communicating with their clients. And part of it was she felt like they were using too much email and hiding behind email, which it does take out some of the nuances of communication, right, when
It
you're
does.
using solely email. So she had worked really hard and really long on putting together this whole plan of not only what we want to do, so we want to improve communication with our clients
Mm-hmm.
and a vision of developing better relationships through that improved communication,
Right.
what they were going to do. She also had outlined every bit of how,
Oh, good.
how to do it. Not so good, actually.
Oh,
Because here's what happens. Staff feel like they have no
oh, no choice.
ownership,
Okay.
no ownership, no input, no buy-in, no commitment to it. So what I told her was, okay, let's go back. And she had already introduced this at some level when we started working together, and they weren't buying into it.
Okay.
So I said, let's go back. Let's go back, and we're going to have the same what, basically, and the same why. We're gonna improve communication so that we can have better client relationships, so we can maintain our clients longer. Da 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 da. We can be more effective. Leave out the how, and go to your staff and say, okay, what are your ideas? How can we do this? What steps do we need to take in? What what are your concerns? What are your issues? Here are a couple of ideas I have. How do you see this working?
Mm.
That's how you get buy-in. And that's how you get people when working at their full potential. When you set expectations for somebody and you ask them to perform, they're much, much more likely to do it.
Very true. Very, very true. What is one of the most valuable lessons that you have learned in coaching your clients through this process?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess on a couple levels, one of the things that I see most, so from a client perspective, if you look at, I use a process or a framework that is really great for implementing change. And when you think about it, when you want to really do anything differently, you're implementing change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's vision, alignment, and execution.
Okay.
And it's from a program called The Work of Leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and involves a profile. So leaders actually take, or leadership teams take this profile so I can see where people tend to score. And there's a couple of places where I see my clients, and this may just be, unique to my clients. I'm not saying this is the case with everybody that takes this profile,
Right.
but there tends to be within the alignment pieces where you get buy-in and where you get commitment.
Okay.
And there's several leadership best practices in there. And where clients tend to fall down or not be as strong is on being open to input,
Okay.
having dialogue around what the idea, their vision is. Really allowing input and dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
being open to that,
Mm-hmm.
allowing staff to challenge the idea
Sure.
without getting defensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one area. And the other area is within execution, there's two best leadership practices that are opposite of each other. One is to be driven so that you have a bias for action. You want to take action more quickly rather than slower. The other is to give praise.
Okay.
And what I way too often see is leaders who are driven and score really well on that, but fall towards the lower end of giving praise.
Okay.
And what happens with that is when you have a driven organization where there's not enough praise, you drive people into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a lesson I would say in terms of working with clients, some trends or patterns that I see. In terms of myself, it really is some of those same lessons actually, is the need to allow people to have dialogue, to have staff have the time to ask their questions and get used to an idea. And that's hard for me as well. It's not something that just I struggle with many of the same things that my clients struggle with,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or I have struggled with them at some point.
Nope, absolutely. And we have learned so much from your previous blabs where you had talked about, management might have been thinking about something for months
Right.
down the road, and they expect staff to adjust within minutes without properly giving them the opportunity to react, to respond, whether it's negative or positive. They're just expected to implement this starting tomorrow.
Absolutely. And that's again in that alignment piece. If you look at the vision, alignment,
Mm-hmm.
execution, in that alignment piece, that having time to get used to the idea, to ask questions, to
Mm-hmm.
talk it over,
Mm-hmm.
to give some of their own ideas and input
Mm-hmm.
is really critical to that alignment process. And time is a part of that.
It absolutely is. That is fantastic. So as we are winding down, what is your top three takeaways for the audience that is listening to this?
So I guess my top three takeaways would be don't be too quick. Don't expect, okay, here, let's put it this way. Don't expect that the people on the bus are going to perform exactly like you want them to perform without a coaching and development and leadership program in place. So don't be, once you've done that, and once you've given people an opportunity to develop and grow and to perform at their full potential, be quick to pull the trigger
Okay.
on letting somebody who's toxic or who's underperforming
Mm,
go. Until you've done that, don't be too quick to pull the trigger. To back up a little bit into the hiring process is pay attention to hiring for values for fit.
mm,
And the way you do that is by identifying first your values and then those behaviors that you want somebody that exemplify that value. And then finally the questions that you can ask to do that. And then the third thing I would say is really to ask yourself this question. Do great leaders surround themselves with great people? Or do great leaders make the people around that surround them great?
mm,
And really think about that question. And then think about, which one of those leaders do you want to be?
right.
How do you want to be known? Somebody, and both is fine. But if you can really be that leader who not only surrounds yourself with great people, but helps those people around you that surround you become even better people,
Mm-hmm.
then that's really the essence of leadership.
That is fantastic. So for the audience, please let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, well, LinkedIn is always great. It's just Julie Chance, and Action Strategies by Design is the name of the business. So either of those are available on LinkedIn. Facebook is Action Strategies by Design. And then Twitter is Julie C with the middle initial C, Chance. And then my website is www.strategies-by-design.com. So strategies-by-design.com. And you can get hold of me through any of those ways, and I would love to connect. with anyone who's interested.
Okay, perfect. If you would like to book Julie for a public speaking engagement, a corporate training, a workshop, or a seminar, please contact me, Kim Tracy, through maxwelljames.net. Thanks so much for being with me here today.
Thanks for having me and have a great rest of the day.
You too.